Chapter 15, Procedural and Diagnostic Coding. The beginning of the chapter, we have the outline, the objectives, and the key terms. Not too many this time, however, they are important. Page 326 starts out with the introduction, history of procedural coding. I would have thought coding had been around maybe 30, 40 years. I didn't realize it dated back to like the 1940s and maybe even further than that. I just know that the WHO, the World Health Organization, started updating the coding back in 1940 something. So that was shocking to me, news to me that has been around this long. But I guess at some point somebody said, "Hey, we got to bill, and we got to bill accurately and across, the board, the same." So there you go. That's how coding was invented. Current procedural terminology codes. So these are still used today. Again, oftentimes this semester I have mentioned the age of this book and the age of the information, but this language, upcoding is a big no-no. You never want to code or file a claim if you're missing any type of information. If you're unsure, stop and ask and utilize the ICD-10 resources and the indexes and all the references that you can, because you do not want to unintentionally cause fraud, abuse. You can be fined. So many fines, or could even be like to a certain extent, can be prison time. As a medical office manager, you want to ensure that you yourself or your employees are following best practices and aware of the terminology and all the laws. Page 327, this speaks to that tabular index I was referring to. Review that. Let me know if you have any questions. So many appendices when it comes to coding. Like coding itself is its own separate certification. There's not a degree in coding yet that I know of. Pretty sure there's not, but there are certifications because there's a lot to it. This is not something you would just be hired and learn how to do on the job. You take courses and get, like I said, certifications, months of training to understand the ins and outs. So this chapter, the goal of this chapter is just a high level overview. What is coding? Why is it important? And what are the repercussions of inaccurate coding and filing of claims? Okay, so page 330 talks about identifying or determining the proper procedure code. Again, you must have all the information that's available to create or decode it properly. Page 331, evaluation and management codes, those are explained there. Elements of E&M codes on page 332. Anesthesia codes, surgery codes. These they're different. Anesthesia is different than surgery. There's two separate bills. There's even I'm getting ahead of myself. There's even radiology billing if you go to a hospital for trauma or surgery. They're all separate. If you've ever if you've ever had a family member to experience a trauma, car accident, or something like that, you get these different bills from these different people. It's not just the hospital billing you. It is the anesthesia team, who is usually not hospital employees. They are contracted. That's a whole separate entity in itself. Radiology is the same way. Many of the radiologists at your local hospitals, they are not employed by the hospital. They're contracted to come and read x-rays and imaging, MRI, such as that. Page 335 talks about pathology, medicine codes, flipping the page over, the Healthcare Common Procedure Code System, proper documentation. This is key. Page 336. I actually worked out in an emergency room out in Clayton, North Carolina for several years. And one of my roles on like Saturdays and Sundays was to come in and do the procedural coding. And I had to have accurate documentation. It helped that a nurse was doing that because I knew that, when a nurse hung the IV, that I knew the IV ran for an hour, but it had to be documented. I had to make sure I had to go and make sure that was documented properly so I could bill and code properly. Documented in the medical record, one of the important things is etiology, is the cause of the illness or cause of complaint. That is important to know and have that documented. 337 digs into the history. Okay, so I just read the first sentence. It began in 1893 with a French physician. That's wild. So even though the WHO started taking over, the World Health Organization started updating the coding in the 40s. It was the diagnostic coding actually started in 1893. That just, I don't know why, but that just blows my mind. That's so cool. ICD-10 Coding is what's in this textbook. The last time I taught this class, it was ICD 9. So by the time you get to where you're going in your career, you may be dealing and hearing about ICD 11. So just know, again, that's why I'm not having you memorize this information and like you must know it because it's going to change. I do want you to take the premise or the basics away from this chapter and just kind of have a, some forethought in finding or coding correctly, knowing where to find the information if you don't have it, if it's not documented, what do you do? And then page 338 talks about finding the correct code, coding more than one diagnosis on page 340, and then our summary of the chapter. So yeah, so just some good stuff. Again, I'll say it, the operation or surgical is very different than anesthesia. Um, like there's specific coding for immunizations. You have to have this, this, and this. Um, what else can I tell you? Just read. There will be matching on the quiz, of course, a few true and false, and other questions that are multiple choice. Let me know if you have any questions about this chapter.